Hi everyone, Tally and Farrell here from Bored of It, and welcome to our review of Genotype, a Mendelian genetics game, which was kindly provided to us for review by the publisher Genius Games. Now, if you didn't understand a word of that title and you're quickly clicking off this video, then you shouldn't. Stop it, come back, because this game is actually pretty good.
Yeah, and as background, this is a surprisingly mean worker placement game, dice drafting game, based on the experiments of Gregor Mendel, who was a monk who essentially significantly contributed to our understanding of modern genetics. And a lot of what he did was with pea plants, where he was crossbreeding them in an attempt for their offspring to have specific traits. So he wanted to see by breeding which parent plants he would get a specific color or a specific height of the plant. And he's actually the person who kind of coined the terms dominant and recessive genes. So join us next week for more science with Dr. Farrell. Well, let's begin with some terminology because there is a bit of it in this game. So when we say trait, what we mean is one of these pairs of letters. So big R, big R, big R, little r, or two little r's. And a trait is given by both parents. So one parent will give one of the letters, the other parent will give the other letter. And this is what leads into what we call the phenotype, which is the physical representation of the trait in the plant, like it having a purple flower. So when we say you're gaining traits, that generally means that you have dice and they're assigned to, one of these pairs of letters, and you draft it, and then you give your pea plant that pair of letters.
Yep, and Genotype is played over 5 rounds, which are split into phases. The first phase is the worker placement phase, where you'll take your very cute little trowel action markers and do actions either on the main board or on your personal player board. In the second phase, you'll roll all of the trait dice, assign it to the right traits on the main board, and then players have the chance to draft the dice and collect the traits. And in the third phase, you'll have the chance to buy upgrades, such as being able to hold more dice or buying more cute little trowel action markers.
The main gameplay loop is collecting and completing these pea plant cards. When you have potted pea plants, during the dice drafting phase, if you draft a die that represents a trait that is on one of your pea plants, you can then cover it up. And when you've covered up all the traits on a pea plant, it is completed, at which point you could take the gardening action that allows you to remove completed pea plants and pot new ones. And this is a way that you'll get the majority of your points in the game. However, there is another excellent way to score points, which is to research phenotypes. You can pay to place a player marker on a trait or traits, and then at the end of the game, for every time those traits show up on your completed cards, you will get the requisite number of points.
Now, some traits will be rolled much less than others, so if somebody gets to a trait before you, then you could be in trouble. Luckily, there are many ways to manipulate the odds. Firstly, you can use one of your worker placement actions to ensure that you get first or second pick of a specific phenotype. You can also alter the traits by manipulating the genes, like so. You can also just straight up cover up one of the traits on your P card, but this does come at a monetary cost, and some of the tools will also help you out in a pinch. When the dice drafting phase of round 5 is finished, the game will end, and then the players will count up the points on their completed pea plants, their phenotype research, any leftover money, and then you also do get a point for any covered up traits on your uncompleted pea plants. And then the player with the most points wins. Genotype is a wonderful game. The theme and the gameplay work together really well to create a game that is greater than the sum of its parts, and the beautiful artwork and the really cute, lovely components really elevate the whole experience. What's really great here is that nothing is too complex, the actions are fairly simple, and the goal of what you're trying to do is fairly singular, yet the decision space is surprisingly large and engaging because of all of the different routes you can take. Do you go for the tool cards, which are easy to get, but you can only use them one time? Or do you wait a little longer, try to save up for an assistant who will give you a permanent special power active for the whole game?
What we love in particular is how surprisingly mean this game is. You know, if you look at the theme and the artwork, you might think, oh, we're going to have a nice family-friendly time, pleasant afternoon. And then next thing you know, you're having a knife fight in a phone box with your nearest and dearest. And the thing is, this game is mean because it's tight. The systems are very tightly balanced, they're very well done. And if you take money as one example, you need money to get upgrades, which are very important to the kind of long-term winning strategies of the game. But you also might need it to go to specific spaces, which are very important as well. And there's actually, in a 2 to 3 player game, only one worker placement space that gives you money. So it's tough, it's tight. And actually, carrying on from that, most worker placement spaces only allow one person to go there in a round. So you have this really tense, tough, tactical battle trying to do everything you want to do in one round.
Worst of all is the fact that the players can alter the traits available and literally make it impossible for you to get the trait that you need. It's particularly savage when someone does this because you can't go to that worker placement space and remove the tile they placed to alter the traits until the following round. One of our favourite games is Barrage, which is a big, complex, heavy, brutal worker placement game, and Genotype is, well, not quite a pocket-sized version of Barrage, but certainly has some of the same cruelty with less complexity and a quicker playtime.
Now you might think between this brutal worker placement and the randomness of rolling dice, Genotype could become a bit frustrating, but we're glad to say that due to some excellent design, that is not the case. There are just so many ways to go about what you want to do that navigating these systems is part of the fun of play. If we just take one example of you want to get a specific trait for your P-plant card, well, I mean, you could start by taking a first shift action, which would let you have first pick out of anyone for a specific color of dice. And, you know, hopefully you can get what you need. Say, though, somebody's taken that first shift and you also desperately need one of those same traits. Well, what you could do is you could do second shift, which goes after the first shifts, but before the general draft. Then you get your pick of any type of trait. Next, you know, you could just alter the trait itself to make it more likely that the one you want will be rolled, increasing your odds. And if that's too fiddly, maybe go for a tool card. Those ones that will let you pick a die and turn it into any other trait of the same color. Or ones that just straight up let you cover up a trait. And if all of that is too complicated, you could just go over here and take space that lets you, again, just straight up cover up a trait on one of your pea plants, but for a cost.
You even get a great push-pull from the pea plants themselves, as the ones that are worth less points are easier to complete and have more common traits, whereas the big point pea plants have more traits that you need to collect and they're often harder to collect. So hopefully all of this gives you a really good idea of how well all of the aspects of Genotype interlink together. Playing is a combination of interesting decisions and sharp workarounds to get where you need to go.
I'd just like to take a moment to say how ecstatic I am that Genotype is so well done. I've been a scientist for 13 years, and it's great to see a game that is so educational, yet also very, very good. There's definitely a dearth of board games based on real-world science, and Genotype has shown that you don't have to sacrifice educational content or theme to make the game enjoyable. And actually, weirdly, because of the merging of the theme and the mechanics and the artwork, this is actually one of the most thematic games I've ever played. And what's really nice is it comes with a little booklet that tells you some of the history and the science behind the game. Now, we've been pretty positive about Genotype, and honestly, we don't really have any serious issues with it. There are a few minor things, but nothing that would be game-breaking. One might be that you could say the phenotype scoring, for being such a big part of the final scoring, is maybe a little too luck-based. And what we mean is that you obviously need specific traits on your completed P-plant cards to kind of match up with the one you've gone for. But this isn't the type of game where you have breathing space. You can't sit and cycle through the cards waiting for the right ones, or let the market be refilled by the people. If you sit and you wait, the game will pass you by, and you just really have to work with what you have. And because of that, quite obviously, some players are just going to get more matching cards by pure luck than others. But then again, you could argue that this is a game where you roll 20 dice at once, and by the way, really satisfying. So maybe it's a bit unfair to complain about luck.
We do also worry a little bit about the impact turn order has on events, because going first is such a powerful advantage. The first player token is just passed around clockwise every round, rather than going to the person who did the worst or something. This is somewhat balanced out by the fact that if you're last in the turn order, you do get first crack at buying the upgrades. But this isn't so helpful if all of the available money in a round is already gone by the time you get to your first worker placement space. And particularly because the price of the upgrades goes up, the more people buy them. So isn't always that helpful. The last thing is, we're not quite sure on the longevity of Genotype for us. Whilst we are thoroughly enjoying it now, the fact that it is lighter in complexity than many other games we play means that it doesn't quite have that edge to grab onto. We feel like we have experienced it, if that makes sense, and at some point it might just have diminishing returns. But we must just stress, this is for us. This is probably a great game to grab if you've watched some of our big heavy Euro reviews like Coffee Traders or Barrage and you like the vibe a bit, but maybe it was just a bit too much for you. Or if you just prefer lighter to medium weight games, then this is an excellent one to grab. So, final thoughts. Genotype is a full recommendation from us. It grabbed us from the start with its lovely visuals and mean gameplay and kept us interested with the surprising depth it offers in terms of how you can go about your goal. It's a lighter game if you're looking for something simpler, but still with some excellent worker placement and dice drafting. You could do a lot worse than Genotype.
In fact, our biggest issue is just that for maybe people who like heavier games, the longevity isn't there. That, it might stay in your collection forever, but it's definitely worth playing if you get the chance. I personally give it 7 scientists out of 7 for, bringing a pivotal moment in science kind of into the forefront and making it a fun experience to play through. So that was our review of Genotype. Thank you for watching, and please consider liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any questions or if you enjoyed the content, we're happy to answer, particularly if there are any science-related questions.
Yeah. I'll pass them to you.
We will go off now because Meg's melting, I think.
She's like desperate for a treat, if she can smell treats or something. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.